Welcome back to Practically Political. It's great to have you with us again. I'm Dave Spencer.
And I'm Carrie Sheffield. Great to have you. Beautiful fall season.
Yes. All right, Carrie, as you would say, let's get right to it. Mike Pence has been rumored that it's a very high probability that he might testify against Trump in these many indictment counts. And now that he's dropped out of the presidential race, he has obviously a lot less to lose. And so I guess my question for you is, what would cause him not to testify? And what do you think the legal impact will be on Trump and then thereby on his electoral prospects, both in the primary and in the general?
Well, these are all really good questions. My understanding is that Mike Pence was trying to not testify, but he had unfavorable rulings such that he will be compelled to testify. So I don't think necessarily that the election would have swayed him either way, although it makes him less distracted or occupied so that he can prepare for it. So I think, and the legal argument, as I understand it, was that he was saying that I was shielded in my capacity of my official duties from having to testify because of executive privilege. But the court said, no, you don't have to testify about a certain sliver of things, but overall, you are going to have to testify. So I don't think it's so much that he has it out for Trump in the sense that now that he's out of the race, he's unfettered and he'll do it. I think it's more that he didn't want to expose himself to potential liability in any way by what he says. But he's going to have to do some type of testimony. I don't think he'll probably say anything that we haven't already heard, though. That's the other thing is he just sold a lot of copies of his book where he talks about what happened on January 6th. And so in that respect, I don't think, unless there's some classified information that neither you nor I, Dave, are privy to, I can't imagine that there would be any additional bombshells that would move the needle in terms of the case here. What do you think?
Well, I think, and first of all, let me just take a step back and say, Mike Pence, I never understood why he ran because he never had a lane, right? He was too Trumpy to get the old school Republicans like me to vote for him. And he wasn't Trumpy enough to get the MAGA crowd, right? So he had really no lane from day one. And also, I think what really killed him is the same thing that killed Tom Emmer, who was the most qualified person other than Steve Scalise, perhaps, to be speaker, was, he had the temerity to be a little bit of an old school Republican and stand up for democracy. And Tom Emmer voted to certify the election, and Mike Pence wouldn't refuse to not do what the basically perfunctory task of a vice president is, and that's to certify the election. And in today's Republican Party, that's what matters. It's not policy. It's not anything else. And so I'm sorry to see, I feel bad for Mike Pence in that way, but it was very self-inflicted. But to answer your question, I think that, yes, I think that there's a lot of stuff that's already out there. And I think that having people like, frankly, Sidney Powell and Kevin Cheeseborough, as I call him, and Jenna Ellis, and particularly Mark Meadows, I think those type of people who are really right there and were in on the planning of the insurrection and the attempts to, and the plan to overthrow the election, the fake electors, all that stuff, where Mike Pence was not directly involved in that. I think they will have more of a compelling testimony. And the other thing I would say is that I think this Georgia trial is the only one that I think has a chance to move the needle. And the reason I say that is because federal trials are not allowed to be televised. State trials are. So you are going to see Trump in court on TV during primary season. Now, is that going to change the MAGA crowd, the people that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and they'd still be with him? No, that 30 or 35% will still be with him. And it may not hurt him in the primary, but I think it could have an effect in the general election because a lot of people would say, you know what, I just don't think with all the baggage this guy has, I can vote for him again, and particularly if he's going to be a convicted felon or he's on his way. So I think that's what is the major risk. It's just another rock on the pile, so to speak. But how do you feel about the other people testifying?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was on I think it's still active. The Twitter Spaces. I don't know if they're going to call them X Spaces or not, but the like the little chats where Twitter users can log in and chat with each other in actual voices. So immediately after 2020 elections, there was a Twitter, one of these little voice chats, one of the little huddles. And I was on there with some of my friends, and Jenna Ellis was on there. And we were all just talking about different things. There were a bunch of, campaign officials and former officials. And I said something about, something. And I mentioned and that Trump lost. So Dave, you will be happy to know that. And that really upset Jenna when I said that, because she agreed with everything else I said except for she said that she's like, Carrie, I agree with everything you said except for that Trump lost. And I said, well, he lost according to the rules, the way that the setup, he lost his appeals. There's a legal process to appeal that is by the Constitution, and he lost all of them. So by that definition, he lost. Do I agree with the changes that were made constitutionally in terms of changes to the balloting, using COVID as a cloak? No, I don't agree with those, but he lost all his appeals. So, I think what they did in Georgia, the fact that they're pleading guilty, I think that is very revelatory. And I hope that it will be a bulwark to prevent this type of this behavior in the future. I don't, the thing is, like, as I understand it, they're getting off jail time with it. So I don't know if that means that I doubt that Trump will plead guilty to anything. If anything, he'll say that it was these people who were doing it and he was merely following their advice. So you'd have to show the criminal intent, which he would say, as he already has said, I was just going by the advice of my counselors.
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to push back a little bit. To say the cloak of COVID is unfair. I think things like drop boxes, you have to remember in November of 2020, there was still not even a vaccine that was out. So people were really scared. And a lot of the stuff that was done to make it easier to vote during COVID was not a cloak. It was just to try to get most people to vote. And that's the thing, which the Republican Party doesn't seem to understand, is that the goal is to get as many people to vote as possible.
Well, when I say cloak, I mean the Constitution says it's the state legislatures that shall make changes and determine the time and manner of elections. That's what I mean. I'm not saying that by that definition, I agree we need to keep people safe, but you can't ignore the Constitution. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, anyway, and I think that as far as Pence goes, he certainly has a reason to be upset, because Donald Trump knew when he tweeted Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do the right thing. He knew people were still at the Capitol and they were saying, hang Mike Pence. And I think if they had really caught him, I think they would have literally hanged him. So again, I don't think he has any reason not to testify, but he was there all along. He had this incredible desire to rationalize everything, to use religion as an excuse for things, to justify all Donald Trump's moral slips and character failings and all that. So, he kind of made this bed and now he has to sleep in it, and he's paid the dues. But in any case, we will see what happens. I think the only effect will be in the general.